The Bible in a year, day 74, Joshua 4 through 6. After the entire nation had completed the crossing of the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them take up 12 stones from the spot in the Jordan riverbed where the priests have been standing. Carry them over with you and place them where you are to stay tonight." Summoning the 12 men he had selected from among the Israelites, one from each tribe, Joshua said to them, "Go to the Jordan riverbed in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Lift to your shoulders 1 stone apiece, so that they will equal in number the tribes of the Israelites. In the future, these are to be a sign among you. When your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean to you?' you shall answer them, 'The waters of the Jordan ceased to flow before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed the Jordan.' Thus these stones are to serve as a perpetual memorial to the Israelites." The 12 Israelites did as Joshua had commanded. They took up 12 stones from the Jordan riverbed as the Lord had said to Joshua, one for each of the tribes of the Israelites. They carried them along to the campsite, and there they placed them. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the Jordan riverbed on the spot where the priests stood who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They are there to this day. The priests carrying the ark stood in the Jordan riverbed until everything had been done that the Lord had commanded Joshua to tell the people, just as Moses and had commanded Joshua. The people crossed over quickly, and when all the people had completed the crossing, the ark of the Lord also crossed, and the priests were now in front of them. The Reubenites, Gadites, the half-tribe of Manasseh, armed, marched in the vanguard of the Israelites, as Moses had ordered. About 40,000 troops equipped for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and so during his whole life they feared him as they feared Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant to come up to the Jordan." Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up from the Jordan." And when the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord had come up from the Jordan riverbed, as the soles of their feet regained the dry ground, the waters of the Jordan resumed their course, and as before overflowed all its banks. And the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the eastern limits of Jericho. At Gilgal, Joshua set up 12 stones that had been taken from the Jordan, saying to the Israelites, "In the future, when your children ask their parents, 'What do these stones mean?' you shall inform them, 'Israel crossed the Jordan here on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan in front of you until you crossed over, just as the Lord your God had done at the Red Sea, drawing it up in front of us until we crossed over, in order that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever.' When all the kings of the Amorites to the west of the Jordan and all the kings of the Canaanites by the sea heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan before the Israelites until they crossed over, their hearts melted, and they were utterly dispirited because of the Israelites. On this occasion the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise Israel for the second time." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Haraloth. This was the reason for the circumcision of all the people who had come out of Egypt. Every male of military age had died in the wilderness during the journey after they came out of Egypt. Though all the men who came out were circumcised, none of those born in the wilderness during the journey after the departure from Egypt were circumcised. Now the Israelites wandered 40 years in the wilderness until all the warriors among the people that came from Egypt died off, because they had not listened to the voice of the Lord. For the Lord swore that he would not let them see the land he had sworn to their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. It was the children God raised up in their stead whom Joshua circumcised, for these were yet with foreskins, not having been circumcised on the journey. When the circumcision of the entire nation was complete, they remained in the camp where they were until they recovered. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have removed the reproach of Egypt from you." Therefore, the place is called Gilgal to the present day. When the Israelites were encamped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they celebrated the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month. On the day after the Passover, they ate of the produce of the land in the form of unleavened cakes and parched grain. On that same day after they ate of the produce of the land, the manna ceased. No longer was there manna for the Israelites, who that year ate of the yield of the land of Canaan. While Joshua was near Jericho, he raised his eyes and saw one who stood facing him, drawn sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for one of our enemies?" He replied, "Neither. I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." Then Joshua fell down to the ground and worshipped and said to him, "What has my Lord to say to his servant?" The commander of the army replied to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Now Jericho was in a state of siege because of the presence of the Israelites. No one left or entered. And to Joshua the Lord said, "I have delivered Jericho, its king and its warriors, into your power." They have the soldiers circle the city, marching once around it. Do this for 6 days, with 7 priests carrying ram's horns ahead of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, and have the priests blow the horns. When they gave a long blast on the ram's horns, and you hear the sound of the horn, all the people shall shout aloud. The wall of the city will collapse, and the people shall attack straight ahead. Summoning the priests, Joshua son of Nun said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant with the 7 of the priests carrying ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord." And he ordered the people, "Proceed and surround the city with the picked troops marching ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests who carried the ram's horns before the Lord marched and blew their horns, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. In front of the priest with the horns marched the picked troops. The rear guard followed the ark, and blowing of the horns was kept up continually as they marched. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Do not shout or make any noise or outcry until I tell you, 'Shout,' then you must shout." So he had the ark of the Lord encircle the city, going once around it, after which they returned to camp for the night. Early the next morning Joshua had the priests take up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests bearing the ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Ahead of these marched the picked troops, while the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, and the blowing of horns was kept up continually. On the 2nd day they again marched around the city once before returning to camp, and for 6 days in all they did the same. On the 7th day, beginning at daybreak, they marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only they did did they march around the city 7 times. The seventh time around, the priests blew the horns, and Joshua said to the people, "Now shout, for the Lord has given you the city and everything in it under the ban. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are in the house with her are to live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But be careful not to covet or take anything that is under the ban, otherwise you will bring upon the camp of Israel this ban and the misery of it. All the silver and gold articles of bronze or iron are holy to the Lord. They shall be put in the treasury of the Lord." As the horns blew, the people began to shout. When they heard the sound of the horn, they raised a tremendous shout. The wall collapsed, and the people attacked the city straight ahead, and they took it. They observed the ban by putting to the sword all living creatures in the city, men and women, young and old, as well as oxen, sheep, and donkeys. To the 2 men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring out the woman with all her family, as you swore to her you would do." The priests entered and brought out Rahab with her father, mother, brothers, and all her family. Her entire family they led forth and placed outside the camp of Israel. The city itself they burned with all that was in it, but the silver, gold, and articles of bronze and iron they placed in the treasury of the house of the Lord. Because Rahab the prostitute had hidden the messengers whom Joshua had sent to reconnoiter Jericho, Joshua let her live, along with her father's house and all her family, who dwell in the midst of Israel to this day. On that occasion Joshua imposed the oath, "Cursed before the Lord be the man who attempts to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn will he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son will he set up its gates." Thus the Lord was with Joshua, so that his fame spread throughout the land. This is the word of the Lord.